The rain had soaked through Marcus Wellington's clothes hours ago. His designer suit, now rumpled and stained, hung loosely on his frame. 3 weeks undercover had transformed the billionaire into exactly the kind of person society preferred to ignore. Security guard Jenkins blocked the courthouse entrance. "Move along, buddy. This isn't a shelter. I have a court appearance," Marcus said quietly, pulling a crumpled paper from his pocket. "Case number 2847B. Jenkins snatched the paper, barely glancing at it. "Yeah, sure. Get lost before I call real police. Check your list. Marcus Wellington." Jenkins pulled out his tablet. "Says here Marcus Wellington is a plaintiff in a major civil case. That ain't you. Homeless. Someone's identity got stolen." He grabbed Marcus by the arm. "You're coming downtown. Identity theft is serious." As handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, a young clerk named Teresa Martinez rushed down the steps. "Wait, that's actually—" "Teresa, get inside. This man is impersonating a plaintiff in a federal case. But I recognize him from the case files. Unless you want to explain to Judge Blackwell why you're interfering with security protocols." Teresa backed away, whispering an apology before disappearing inside. This was supposed to be the culmination of 3 weeks of investigation. Marcus had spent that time sleeping in shelters, eating at soup kitchens, experiencing firsthand the treatment of homeless individuals in the city's justice system. He documented every abuse, gathered evidence for the most comprehensive civil rights lawsuit the city had ever seen. He hadn't planned on being arrested at his own trial. Jenkins returned with 2 police officers. Officer Reynolds looked Marcus over, taking in the disheveled appearance. "Marcus Wellington is a billionaire, Jenkins. You think a billionaire shows up to court looking like this?" "I am Marcus Wellington," Marcus said steadily. "I've been undercover for 3 weeks investigating systemic abuse of homeless individuals. Today is my court date. Judge Blackwell is expecting me." The 3 men erupted in laughter. "Undercover billionaire? That's creative." Jenkins wheezed. Reynolds pulled out his phone. "I'll call the law firm representing Marcus Wellington. They can tell us what their client looks like." He dialed. "This is Officer Reynolds. I'm at the courthouse with a man claiming to be your client, Marcus Wellington. Can you describe what he looks like?" "Marcus Wellington is one of the most photographed businessmen in the country," came the response. "His picture is on the cover of Forbes this month." "What's he look like when he's not on magazine covers?" "African-American, about 6'2", athletic build, closely trimmed beard, designer suits." "He's 42. Why?" Reynolds described Marcus. The line went silent. Then, "Oh, God, it worked. He actually went through with it. That is Marcus Wellington, you idiot. He's been undercover investigating homeless treatment. If you've arrested my client, you're about to become defendants in a lawsuit that will make this morning's case look like a parking ticket." Reynolds' face went pale. "Get those handcuffs off him right now." Marcus rubbed his wrists. "You thought a homeless man couldn't possibly be telling the truth. You chose to see a homeless man instead of a human being. And that choice is exactly what my lawsuit is about." He walked into the courthouse lobby. Every eye turned to him. The crowd parted like he was contagious. A lawyer pulled her briefcase closer. A mother pulled her children away. The contempt was suffocating. Teresa appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Wellington, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken up. Perhaps you'll testify about what you saw here this morning?" "Absolutely. Whatever you need." Courtroom 4B was packed with journalists, activists, and homeless advocates. Sarah Strauss, his lead attorney, rushed over as he entered. "Marcus, my God, you really did it. Lived it every day for 3 weeks. And I documented every indignity, every abuse, every violation the city inflicts on its most vulnerable citizens. They didn't believe you downstairs, did they? They arrested me, handcuffed me, which means we now have even more evidence." "All rise." The Honorable Judge Sarah Blackwell presiding. Judge Blackwell swept in with commanding confidence. She'd built her career on being tough on crime, especially crimes committed by the homeless. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, then landed on Marcus with visible disgust. "Ms. Strauss, Is it your client at the plaintiff's table? Yes, Your Honor. This is Marcus Wellington. He looks like he should be appearing as a defendant, not a plaintiff. He looks like he slept in a dumpster. Several people gasped. Your Honor, I must object, Sarah began. Sit down. Mr. Wellington, this is a court of law. We have standards. You're here looking like a vagrant, smelling like the streets, making a mockery of these proceedings. I've been living on the streets for 3 weeks as part of my investigation into how the city treats its homeless population, Marcus said calmly. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Blackwell's face flushed red. You, a supposed billionaire, chose to live on the streets, and now you want to sue the very people who keep the city safe from vagrants and criminals. I want to sue the people who violate the constitutional rights of human beings, Your Honor. The fact that you refer to homeless individuals as vagrants and criminals proves exactly why this lawsuit is necessary. Judge Blackwell stood abruptly. How dare you come into my courtroom dressed like trash and lecture me? I know the law better than some trust fund baby playing dress-up could ever hope to understand. Marcus stood slowly. Your Honor, 3 weeks ago I walked out of my penthouse and began living on the streets. On the first night, police told me I was trespassing for sleeping on a bench. When I asked where I was supposed to go, they said that wasn't their problem. He walked toward the center of the courtroom. Over 3 weeks, I was stopped by police 17 times, searched illegally 9 times, threatened with arrest 12 times, actually arrested twice, once for sitting on public steps, once for waiting for a soup kitchen to open. Perhaps if you had identified yourself. I tried, Your Honor, every single time. They laughed. They told me, sure, I was a billionaire, just like the last guy was Batman. My truth was treated as a delusion, as evidence of mental illness. Marcus's voice grew stronger. I was spit on by strangers, kicked by teenagers, had food thrown at me. But the worst part wasn't the violence from random citizens. It was a systematic dehumanization by institutions supposed to protect and serve, by police who saw a homeless man and assumed criminal, by court officials who saw my appearance and assumed worthlessness, by judges like you who look at someone in tattered clothes and assume they have nothing valuable to say. He spread his arms wide. But here's the truth that makes people like you so uncomfortable. I am Marcus Wellington. I am worth $2.3 billion. I hold patents on 17 pieces of technology. I employ over 5,000 people. I have degrees from MIT and Stanford. And for 3 weeks, none of that mattered because I looked like this. Do you understand what that means? Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, all of it became invisible the moment I looked homeless. My intelligence disappeared. My dignity disappeared. My constitutional rights disappeared. I became less than human in the eyes of the city and people like you. Judge Blackwell's hands gripped the bench, knuckles white. So when you talk about these people with such contempt, Marcus continued quietly but forcefully, when you treat them as less deserving of justice, you reveal exactly why this lawsuit needs to exist. Because you can't even see the human being standing in front of you when that human being doesn't fit your narrow definition of who deserves respect. Sarah placed a thick folder on the bench. Your Honor, we have documentation of every illegal stop, every unconstitutional search, every violation over 3 weeks. Testimony from 117 other homeless individuals. Video evidence. Statistical analysis proving discriminatory enforcement. Financial records showing the city spends $40 million per year criminalizing homelessness while spending less than $10 million on actually helping people. Marcus pulled out a small recording device. I recorded something interesting this morning, right before I walked into this courthouse. He pressed play. Judge Blackwell's own voice filled the courtroom. Jesus Christ, more homeless trash on the courthouse steps. Someone call security. I swear, this city is going to hell. Used to be you didn't have to look at these people. Now they're everywhere like cockroaches. The courtroom exploded. Judge Blackwell's face went from pale to bright red. That's out of context. You meant exactly what you said, Marcus interrupted. Homeless people aren't human beings to you. They're trash. They're cockroaches. They're an inconvenience to be cleared away, not citizens with constitutional rights to be protected. Judge Blackwell stood abruptly. Case dismissed. You can't dismiss this case, Sarah said firmly. We presented evidence of systematic constitutional violations. I said dismissed. Mr. Wellington, you've had your publicity stunt. This isn't about justice. This is about a rich man playing games. You went slumming for 3 weeks, and now you want to be celebrated as a hero. I know that constitutional rights don't disappear based on income level, Marcus replied. I know the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches regardless of clothing. I know the Eighth Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And I know the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection, which means you can't enforce rules selectively based on housing status. He walked closer to the bench. Let's talk about how the city arrests homeless individuals for sleeping outside, then releases them with nowhere to go. How we confiscate their possessions, leaving them with nothing, then arrest them again. How we create a system where homelessness itself is treated as a crime. Judge Blackwell sank back into her chair. What do you want from me? I want justice. Real justice. I want this court to acknowledge that the city's treatment of homeless individuals violates the Constitution. I want unconstitutional ordinances struck down. I want the $40 million spent on criminalization redirected to actual services. And I want you removed from cases involving homeless defendants because you've proven you cannot treat them fairly. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Blackwell stared at Marcus, her expression cycling through shock, fury, and fear. Finally, she spoke, barely audible. This court will take a recess. I need to consult with the chief judge. No recess, Marcus said firmly. We're here. The evidence is presented. You're going to rule right now. Because if you don't, I'll add judicial misconduct to the lawsuit. Every contemptuous word, every assumption you made based on my appearance, becomes part of the public record. Your career will be defined by the day you couldn't see past a man's clothes to the truth standing in front of you. Judge Blackwell opened the folder with shaking hands. As she read, the color drained from her face. The evidence was overwhelming. Ms. Strauss, what exactly are you seeking? Federal consent decree on homeless policies, cessation of arrests for existing in public spaces, mandatory training for police, reallocation of enforcement funding to services, expungement of criminal records, and Your Honor, your recusal from any case involving homeless defendants effective immediately. Judge Blackwell closed her eyes. Her entire career hung in the balance. Finally, she opened them. Mr. Wellington, I owe you an apology. I don't want your apology. I want change. And you're right about all of it. Her voice grew stronger. I've spent 15 years convinced I was serving justice. But what I was really doing was protecting people like me from having to see people like the person I thought you were. She looked at the courtroom. I didn't see you, Mr. Wellington. I saw a homeless man and assumed the worst. That was wrong. It was a violation of everything this bench represents. Judge Blackwell stood, removing her robe slowly. I am recusing myself from this case and all cases involving homeless defendants. Furthermore, I'm recommending review of every case I presided over involving homelessness-related charges. Because if I couldn't see the truth about you, how many others did I fail to see? She folded her robe and laid it on the bench. Ms. Strauss, I will not fight your lawsuit. I'll testify on behalf of your case. Everything Mr. Wellington documented is true. This system is broken, and I was one of the people who broke it. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for exits. Advocates embraced, crying. Marcus simply nodded. Thank you, Your Honor, for having the courage to admit the truth. Judge Blackwell looked at him, really looked for the first time. What you did took tremendous courage. Most people experiencing homelessness can't end it whenever they want. You could, but you chose to stay, to document, to fight. That matters. It matters only if it leads to real change, Marcus agreed. 3 weeks doesn't make me an expert. It gives me credibility when I talk about what I saw. People will listen to me in a way they won't listen to someone who's been homeless for years. That's not fair. but it's reality, and I'm going to use that reality to force the city to do better." He turned to the gallery. "This lawsuit is about every person dehumanized by a system that values order over justice. It's about changing a system that has forgotten the most basic principle. All people are created equal, not all housed people. All people." His voice filled the courtroom with intensity. "Over 3 weeks, I met veterans who served their country with no support waiting for them. Single mothers who lost jobs and couldn't afford rent. People with mental illness released with nowhere to go. Teenagers aged out of foster care with no resources. Every single one had a story. Every single one was a human being. Every single one deserved better. I met a man named Thomas with 3 master's degrees who developed schizophrenia, arrested 14 times for talking to himself. I met Maria, who worked 2 jobs but couldn't afford an apartment. I met Devin, 15 years old, who chose the streets over an abusive foster home. Several people were crying now. These people Judge Blackwell calls trash. They're teachers and veterans and parents and children. And instead of helping them, we criminalize them. We arrest them. We take away what little they have and act surprised when they're still homeless the next day." He turned back to Judge Blackwell. "You asked what I want. I want the city to stop treating homelessness like a crime and start treating it like what it is, a failure of our social systems and collective compassion. I want police to offer help before handcuffs. I want judges to see human beings instead of case numbers. I want a society that measures success not by how well it serves the wealthy, but by how well it protects the vulnerable." Judge Blackwell picked up her gavel. "I used to think this represented justice, but I was using it to hammer down people already at the bottom. Not anymore." She brought it down firmly. "This court rules in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. This city's treatment of homeless individuals is unconstitutional, inhumane, and effective immediately. It ends." The courtroom exploded in applause and cheers. 3 months later, the city had transformed. The $40 million was redirected. New shelters opened with beds, showers, medical care. Mental health services expanded. Job training launched. Housing vouchers became available. The approach shifted from criminalization to support. Marcus returned to his penthouse, changed. Every board meeting included discussions about corporate responsibility. His company started a program hiring formerly homeless individuals. Judge Blackwell kept her promises. She testified before city council. She worked with advocacy groups to reform laws. She became a vocal proponent of homeless rights. 6 months later, Marcus received a letter from Thomas. "I have an apartment now. It's small, but it's mine. I'm teaching again at community college. I spent 7 years on the streets being invisible. But you saw me, and now, because of what you did, hundreds are getting a second chance." A year after the trial, Marcus spoke at Harvard Law School. "What I did was not heroic. It was a bare minimum someone with my resources should do when they see injustice. The real heroes are the people who survive homelessness without privileges, the advocates who work every day with no recognition, the people who maintain humanity despite a system designed to strip it away." 5 years later, Marcus stood in courtroom 4B for a ceremony. The room had been renamed the Thomas Ellsworth Memorial Courtroom, honoring the man with 3 master's degrees who'd spent 7 years homeless but died in his apartment, teaching and mentoring. Judge Blackwell stood beside him. He would have liked this. "Every person who benefits from the changes we made, they're Thomas's legacy," Marcus replied. The ceremony honored not just Thomas, but the ongoing work, because homelessness hadn't been eliminated, but the approach had fundamentally shifted. Marcus was asked to speak. Thomas used to say society should be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. "We're doing better now, but we can't stop. Every person still sleeping on the streets reminds us our work isn't finished." 5 years ago, I came to this courthouse expecting to file a lawsuit. I didn't expect to be arrested, but I'm grateful because it forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about who we are and what we value. He looked at the crowd. "Each of you has the power to see people others ignore. You don't have to be a billionaire. You don't have to go undercover. You just have to care enough to look at the human beings around you and ask whether they're being treated with dignity." Thomas saw humanity in everyone. He never stopped believing people could be better, that systems could change, that justice was possible. So let this courtroom be a reminder, not a failure, but of possibility. That's the justice we're still fighting for. The audience rose in applause. Marcus understood that his 3 weeks hadn't just changed laws. They'd changed hearts and minds. He wasn't a hero. He was someone willing to see what others refused to look at, to fight for people others had written off. And in doing so, he discovered that justice isn't handed down by judges in robes. Justice is built by ordinary people who refuse to accept that anyone deserves to be treated as less than human. The ceremony ended, but the work continued. And in Courtroom 4B, the Thomas Ellsworth Memorial Courtroom, a new generation gathered each day to fight for real justice. The kind that sees everyone, helps everyone, protects everyone. The kind that treats people with dignity, regardless of bank account. That's the story of how one man's 3 weeks changed the city's approach to its most vulnerable. Not because he was a billionaire, but because he was willing to become invisible to expose the truth. And in doing so, he made it impossible for anyone to look away ever again.